Just so you know, Josh, I'm opening the show with Super Freak Love because...
Oh, that was a jam. That was my jam.
I'm surprised it's not your intro to your show.
I just didn't milk it that much, when I say that I was in Primer 55. But that was one of my all-time favorites to play live. So yeah, I love some Super Freak Love.
And if you are one of those fuckers who jumps when I get loose, then you are ready for this episode of Discography Discussion. I am Dan, that is Joe, that is Jeff, and that is Joshua Toomey.
The legendary Joshua Toomey.
Legendary bass player, podcaster extraordinaire. The third.
Esquire.
The third, yes.
Esquire.
What's up, gentlemen? How are we tonight?
We're good. I got my beer. I got all my yard work done. We're killing it.
We're celebrating New Metal May in honor of
Yes,
the
we
Roach
are.
Coach podcast.
There we go. Good guys over there at the Roach Coach podcast.
Absolutely.
Yep.
And I can only assume that since Josh is here, we're talking about...
Sunny Day Real Estate.
Yes!
I predicted that before we went on. I told Jeff, I was like, at some point, Toomey's going to ask me and Joe to leave the room, and then it's just going to be 2 hours of them talking about Sunny Day Real Estate.
Perfectly fine with that.
There's a Nintendo in the other room. I mean, I'm good on that.
Yeah, they can play Turtles in Time.
So Primer 55.
New metal at its new metalist.
New metal as fuck, I think it was described as on the Roach Coach podcast.
Well, I guess not new metal enough for the Roach Coach podcast because none of that first album made it into the canon, which I highly disagree with.
It was they said it was too new metal. It is the first of 2 times I've now heard the Roach Coach guys criticize something for being too new metal. They said it was new metal to a fault.
How can it be new metal to a fault? It's the definition of new metal.
It is. It's like when they did the Third Strike album. That was also,
Don't bring it up. We're still having a fight.
one of those generic. Yeah, Joe's not talking to the Roach Coach guys currently because of that. I don't know why though. At least a couple of those songs made it into the canon.
Yeah, I feel like I've at least represented somewhat of the new metal greatness that is Third Strike.
Well, we'll get to that next week.
Spoiler.
So when was the first time any of you guys, this is open floor, heard Primer 55 or was introduced to the band?
105.7 The Point, year 2001. Watch these fuckers jump as I get loose.
They played that on the Point?
Yes, heavily censored, but it was on The Point.
Got it.
Yeah, it was about the same time for me, too. It was the same thing. KPNT The Point here in St. Louis. What about you, Dan?
Well, shit, that's what I got. I heard them on the Point as well, but I don't think they played Loose. I think they played Hate, and they played it really late. They played it really late at night. It was during one of their, they had this weird, deep cuts show for a while where they would play songs. That was the first time I heard Mudvayne's Pharmacopoeia.
Oh, yeah, when
And-
Les Aaron on Sunday nights.
Yeah.
When they played the good shit that they wouldn't play during the week.
The Australian or New Zealand guy.
Yeah.
I don't remember
I
where
thought
he
he was
from.
British.
But no,
or whatever.
This is years ago. Yeah.
He's still prominent, just not in St. Louis.
Yeah.
My introduction to Mayhem was I had a previous band called 12 Volt Negative Earth out of Nashville, and we had put out our second album EP, and our van had broken down, so we weren't able to properly tour. So I got the harebrained idea to follow Korn and sell CDs in the parking lot prior to the show. And so myself and my drummer went along, and this was the Korn Sick and Twisted tour, and Stained was out with them. And so we did a few shows, and we actually did really well in CD sales. It was really odd. We were just walking up and down with Discmans and having people check out the album and selling it for $5 a piece. And a lot of people ended up buying it without even listening to it. I think people were just more apt to buy music then. So so Korn had a day off, but Stained was supposed to play in Louisville, and young up-and-coming Primer 55 was the opening band for Stained on this tour, or for this show. And Stained ended up canceling, but we ended up going to the show anyway. And so I basically saw Primer headline in Louisville, and I fell in love with the band, and ended up talking to the guitarist Bobby Burns and Jason after the show for a little while, and I really hit it off with them. And that's kind of my introduction to the band. Love seeing them live, and then kind of kept in touch with them through the years.
So you think that energy that they had on Introduction to Mayhem was translated pretty well live? Because I would imagine that may have seemed like It had to have been a pretty intense live experience. Just hearing him play some of those songs with full energy, just dudes moving across the stage. And I mean, I can only imagine some of the songs on that record were very created just basically for the pits.
Yeah, there were definitely a lot of pit stokers, pit activators on that. And yeah, it was fun. It was just such a fun vibe. And they had at one point brought basically the entire crowd onto the stage, and like everyone was freaking out that the show was great. And I've talked about this in the past, but I had opened for Limp Bizkit at one point and met Fred Durst, and Fred had kind of like this air about him, like an it factor air about him. And when I met Bobby Burns, he kind of had that same like it factor air about him, and I was like, man, if I ever get a chance to play in a band with that guy, I'm definitely going to jump on it. So yeah, he definitely has an aura about him that so if you're going to be successful, follow that guy, that kind of thing.
Yeah, and he went on to be in Soulfly for a little while.
Yeah, he did like 4 albums with them.
Yeah. It's funny because when you're reading about this stuff, it's just like, oh, he was in, and then he was out, but then if you're thinking about the years,
it was like 6-7 years.
Yeah,
right.
It didn't end well, but yeah, it was one of those, one of those deals.
And no comment.
Right, I know.
Before we start talking about things that end well, I'm going to take this time to say thank you to everyone for listening to this podcast. Thank you for listening and for subscribing. If you are not a subscriber, you can find everything Discography Discussion at discussmetal.com. We are on Google Play, iTunes, Stitcher, TuneIn Radio, so if you have an Amazon Echo or a Google Home, you have no excuse. Ask it to play the latest episode of the Discography Discussion podcast, and it will. We're also on Facebook and on Twitter at Discuss Metal. Be sure to like, favorite, and subscribe. It really helps us out. It lets us know you're listening. And now Dan is going to tell us all about 5-star reviews.
We love 5-star reviews here on Discography Discussion. If you feel like we deserve a review, give us one. You can give us a review on Facebook or on Apple Podcasts or on Stitcher. I think you can do Stitcher too.
Absolutely.
One guy did, but that was a while back. But yeah, so we love reviews. Reviews really help us show up in like search results and stuff if you search for Metal Podcast. I've actually noticed on Apple Podcasts that a lot of the podcasts that we feature on the show, and we've been on some of their shows and stuff. I know if you type in Roach Coach, you can go down and recommend it if you like. We're on there. You can type in Talk Toomey Podcast, and we show up in the recommended as you like. So we wear that as a badge of pride, and so it's really cool just kind of seeing how all the podcasts are together, and you guys as listeners and how you guys tag things and like things and stuff. All that data, helps us get out to more people. So that's the only reason we ask for reviews. We don't get paid for getting a good review, but it really does help us out a lot.
And now Josh is going to tell us about the legendary Talk Toomey Podcast.
Ooh, Talk Toomey Podcast. Great metal podcast hosted by myself. If you're into all things metal, head over to Talk Toomey. You can head over to metalnexus.net/talk-toomey for the archives of the Talk Toomey podcast. And lately, man, the guests have been great. Max Cavalera, sat down with him for a while. Heidi from the Butcher Babies was on. Rob Flynn, Phil Anselmo, all the heavy metal titans have been on this year. So it's been a great time. And yeah, coming up on 3 years of doing it. And yeah, check it out. Talk Toomey Podcast, TOOMEY.
If you get to the one about what language therapy or that's not the right one.
Death therapy.
No, not death therapy.
Not death therapy either.
Yeah.
Speech pathology.
Speech pathology. There you go. That sounds.
I still wonder if that lady knows of me. I mean, she has to because we use a lot of the same the same hashtag.
How many times do you think she sent people to that podcast and they got yours instead, but just stuck with you anyway?
I don't know. That would be funny. I'm actually kind of waiting for her to say something because, obviously a name like Talk Toomey, I never even thought to Google search it, and it looks like she's been using that phrase for like a year longer. So if she ever comes up and says, "Hey, I want my phrase back," I'll be like, "Oh, all right."
That's when you say, "Show me the copyright info,"
and I'll show you the T-shirt.
There you go. Send her a free pentagram tee.
Right? Yeah, I'm sure she loves that. There's also there's 2 more versions of it. There's a senator in Pennsylvania. His last name is Toomey, and during his campaign, he was using hashtag Talk Toomey. And then there's also a real estate agent in Chicago that his name is Dennis Toomey, and he for some reason hashtags Talk Toomey on his real estate post. So yeah, it's not as original as I thought.
It's getting crowded.
I know. I have to start flexing my muscles.
There you go.
And reaping the benefits.
Be like, I'm sorry, did you have Wes Borland on your podcast? I didn't think so.
Right. Did you talk to Wes Borland for 2 hours and then get called out by Aaron Lewis on stage? No, you didn't.
No, you did not. Sorry, that whole situation is just hilarious to me.
I watched that clip and all I could think was, just say, have you heard the Talk Toomey podcast? You fuck.
Fist from Metal Nexus pointed out when he goes, have you heard the podcast? You can hear a couple of people say yes. So I thought that was kind of cool.
That is cool.
So Dan, tell me about Primer 55.
Well, Primer 55 is Primer 55 was a hard rock new metal band. Let's just go new metal. I'll throw the hard rock out. The new release notwithstanding, but yeah, they were a band from Louisville, weren't they? Originally?
Yeah, it's kind of convoluted. Bobby was from Louisville, and then Bobby Burns moved to Memphis, and that's where Jason Luttrell was from, and the rest of the guys of the original Primer were basically formed out of Memphis. And then after they got signed, Bobby moved the band back to Louisville. So, technically, when I had Bobby on the podcast a long time ago, I always said that was kind of a downfall of Primers. They truly never had a home because they kind of came back to Louisville as a signed band. So they didn't have that built-in local, the guys follow it. Yeah, the grassroots, the guys following the band and being proud of them from being from town. So the Primer 55 has always been the redheaded stepchild to Flaw in Louisville.
Shots fired. Wow.
Well,
I'm kidding.
Resident Flaw fan in the room?
Not as much as I am of Primer 55.
Well, I mean, not to keep bringing up Roach Coach, but yeah, they put Flaw's entire album in the canon, and they didn't put this one in.
And they didn't put the first Korn album in.
I know.
So Flaw is new metal. Korn.
Yeah,
the
exactly.
originators of new metal, depending on who you believe.
Well,
exactly.
These guys definitely were not innovators, but that doesn't mean that they didn't take a lot of elements from bands that were successful and meld them together into something that I thought was pretty enjoyable on that first record. I would say that the vocals are predominantly rapped by vocalist Jason or Jason, however you want to do that one. And lots of raps, lots of screams, not very much clean singing. It was really just about aggression, about balls on that record, and there's a lot of balls. There's balls all over this record.
This really is the only album that anyone knows when you bring up the band Primer 55. Some people have heard of the new release, the EP snuck in here and there, but when you mention Primer 55, the majority of people that I've talked to, it's, oh yeah, Introduction to Mayhem, that cover with the cartoon chick punching the other in the face. I'm into that. I was like, well, clearly you weren't into that very much.
The first album definitely had the best album cover. That the two chicks fighting, and it's all artsy and stuff, and the anime kind of thing going on there. But I love the first album cover.
Yeah, this record, I think most people, when they think of Primer 55, the first song that comes to mind is Loose.
Yeah.
That was kind of their biggest hit off of this CD. And I guess with Primer, the question I have is I can't figure out why they didn't achieve more success than they did on this record. And we'll talk about it on the new release as well. But really, this record had all of the ingredients to be a successful new record. And I don't know if it was oversaturation at that point or, if, because this was too early for people to be moving on to heavier stuff. This was
I don't know, man. I think this definitely came out in the oversaturation period of new metal. This came out in 2000, so it's just like it was like right there at the pinnacle. I mean, obviously a couple of years later is when it really truly died off, but this is definitely getting to that point where there were tons of new metal bands getting signed all over the place. And I'm sure that's one of the reasons that Primer even got signed is because every label was kind of looking for their their
next big hit.
new metal band.
They're looking for their Limp Bizkit or you know their Korn.
Well, his vocals are awesome. I actually really enjoy listening to him. Vocalists are a big thing for me, so I think his screams are fantastic, and his rhythm when he's rapping is really, really good too.
You love vocals, but you don't like the lyrics.
Yeah, I could give a shit what the hell he's saying, as long as he sounds good while doing it.
Well, if you stream the album on Google Music, you can't hear everything he's saying because you can only hear the censored version of this record on Google Play Music.
Yeah,
I think, Jeff, you were saying on Spotify that you have the uncensored.
Yeah,
so.
There's both versions. There's the edited and unedited on Spotify.
I did dig out my CD, which was scratched all to shit.
It's funny you brought up the censored version thing, because when I first auditioned for Primer, I had a question about a song, and I had bought the CD at like a used record store, and I played it for Bobby, and I was like, what's going on right here or something? And he was like, is this the edited version? He was like, you have the clean version of the album? So I guess when I learned the Primer 55 songs, I learned it off of the clean album.
I made that mistake back in the 90s because I bought a couple albums from Walmart, and they just edited everything and just didn't tell you. So I was like, what the hell? Like the first time, back then, I liked 311. I love Grassroots. I know I said that earlier, but that was a big album for me in the mid 90s, and I bought it at Walmart, and I'm like, yeah, this is great. And then I'm like, wait a sec, this doesn't sound like My Friends, and it's because it was all edited to fuck. And I'm like, son of a bitch. And I went to return it, and they wouldn't take it back. And I'm like, well, where does it say that you edited it? And they're like, we edit every CD
if there's no parental advisory on it, and there should be, that's.
Well, I didn't know. I didn't know. I was a dumb teenager. I had no clue.
Because like my first Mudvayne album, LD50, was censored. And I didn't know.
I distinctly recall buying Green Day's Dookie at Walmart. Half of my Metallica collection came from Walmart. Of course, they don't curse on the album, except for the new ones. Sorry, Dan.
I mean, Kill 'Em All had...
No, it didn't. I've got it. Well, at least it wasn't censored. So I missed the boat when Walmart started censoring, because I started buying my records at Virgin and Best Buy and Sam Goody.
Sam Goody, yay.
I feel like there was cursing on Kill 'Em All. Ride the Lightning.
I don't think there are.
Ride the Lightning.
I don't think there is, man.
None of the early Metallica records have cursing on them.
It's just...
No, Master of Puppets definitely does with Damage Incorporated. And Justice for All on Dyer's Eve.
He's a genius.
Hey, dude, I grew up...
You're correct. Apparently Walmart didn't know what they had.
Well, if a record has less than a certain amount of curse words on it, it will not get a parental advisory. And I don't even know if any of those rules are still in place, but in the 90s...
Does that mean that Metallica is the only band greater and more powerful than Walmart?
Well, and some of them just didn't give a shit. Like my Glassjaw, Everything You Ever Wanted to Know About Silence record doesn't have a parental advisory on it. And that dude says fuck at least 150 times on that record. And but they didn't print it in the lyric book, so I don't know if like some of these music censors were just like, it's not in the book, so it's probably okay. Because the first Stone Sour record has a little bit of cursing on it, and there was no advisory sticker on that either.
So what you're telling me is that it was some lazy asshole that just opened it up, read the liner notes, and never even listened to it.
Yes.
So if you didn't print the lyrics, you were all right.
Well, as being a kid with religious parents, I was thankful for that, because I got to hear uncensored stuff that I normally wouldn't, because that was the thing. Back in my early days was I would have to get a CD, hand it to my parents. They had to read through the lyrics and then decide whether or not I would keep it or I could keep it or not.
So speaking of all the censor stuff, I thought this was actually funny. I was listening to a little bit of this the other day on Spotify, and the version of Set It Off that was on Spotify, I had never heard before. It was completely censored, but it was like a redone version of Set It Off, which I had heard about, but I'd never actually heard. And to where like Ja Red from Head PE's rap is completely different. It's all clean. The chorus is a little bit different. It's got some like, wave your hands in the air like you just don't care kind of stuff going on. And I walked away going, oh, that's actually a lot better than what I remembered it being. But that was actually a much better version of Set It Off than I had actually originally heard.
The turntablist stuff that's sampled in and out of here, I guess that's Is that just done like on a loop whenever you guys are playing live, or?
We just never played. They just never use that stuff.
Oh, okay.
Like the live band was always just a raw, 4-piece band.
Gotcha.
See, I would be disappointed if I went and didn't at least get the drum machine, if you know what I mean.
Some of that stuff was hard for the drummers to pull off because it was like such drum machine, but some of it was like happy accident, mistake drum machines. So trying to get a real drummer to play some of that stuff was always kind of hard.
Yeah, it's got to be frustrating to be so robotic, but also it just be kind of, there's an uncanny valley to a drum machine that whenever a real drummer hears it, it just kind of almost goes against everything that they're about. Because a lot of the drummers, especially in nu metal, were just definitely more about the feel of everything. With the drum machines and samples and stuff, that had to be really hard to keep up with. But But yeah, no, this record I loved. One of the things that I took away a lot, because I was a big Primer fan. I really loved this record, and I loved Head PE a lot at the time. For some reason, I didn't like Limp Bizkit, which, looking back on it, I think a lot of that had to do with there was no way I was passing a Limp Bizkit album past my parents. There was no way, So if you can't beat them, you just act like, I don't really like that band anyway, the sort of stuff that you say to keep your parents off your back, and then you're smuggling Korn records. This kid named Chris at my school used to. My very first copy of Introduction to Mayhem was actually, he dubbed his CD copy to a tape for me, and I think we put on the label like Gospel Hits Volume 4 or something.
Nice.
And
Please tell me you still have that.
I don't know. I have to look. It's probably still at my parents' house if I do, but yeah, I used to do that a lot. Like the first Korn album was Sandy Patty. I want to say I had a copy of $3 Bill, but it was on a really bad tape because, like, my friend would just bring me these blank tapes that had been taped over like a million times. So, like, as far as sound quality goes, I'm sure it was pretty substandard, but I had a really bad version of $3 Bill, the Korn self-titled. I had Stained Tormented, the Tormented album that they did. And I would always just like put like contemporary Christian artist names as the as the labels.
I'm glad I didn't have to worry about that,
dude.
I wouldn't have figured that out. I was too fucking high to know.
When my dad my dad just started popping my tapes in one day, and
explain these lyrics, son.
Oh my god, yeah.
If you could even understand what they're saying.
But I mean, that's why I'm so like lyrics, because I got defensive and would pay only attention to that, like that. I had to be able to read it, understand it, and be able to justify it to someone else.
See, I got so good at just bullshitting to my mom, because my mom and I would like road trip to Colorado from St. Louis. That's a 1,000-mile drive essentially in one direction, and she'd like pick my brain on every single song that I'd want to play, because we'd play like an album of hers, album of mine, and I just started bullshitting. So I think that's probably the reason why I don't pay attention to the lyrics, because I don't want to know what the hell they're saying, because at the time I just wanted to say whatever was coming into my brain, so my mom would just leave me the fuck alone so I could listen to my music.
Well, and this record was definitely a conservative parent's nightmare as far as lyrics go.
Hip hop, heavy metal.
You mean you couldn't get the big fuck you past your parents?
No, not so much. Yeah.
That's a misprint, Mom. I'm sorry.
Oh my God! It says that. There were times I would sell bands. I'd be like, "Oh my God! It says that. I haven't even listened to that. Oh my God, Mom! Thank you so much for finding that before I did. Who knows who I would have gone out and killed and raped if I'd have heard that." But yeah.
Wow, dude! Jesus for forgiving us tonight.
Right? Yeah, for sure. But yeah, it was. This record, though. I mean, I loved this. And I loved Head PE. I thought that these two bands were similar enough. It's kind of hard to like Head PE and not at least appreciate Primer 55. And yeah, I mean, I thought this was really cool. I wasn't as much of an asshole as far as like, well, I mean, are these guys for real? Because I'm sure he doesn't beat asses and fuck and do all this stuff in real life. Even I don't know. I'm just talking out of my ass. So like stuff like that. So when I'm listening to it in 2018, I'm like, I wonder how much of this is real and how much like he wanted it to be real. But I don't know the guy personally, so I can't say. But I think very interesting upbringing as Jason must have had to come up with some of this stuff. And not only that, I'm assuming he wrote all the lyrics, and I don't know if that's true or not.
If my memory serves me correct, I think in talking to him, I believe he did. I know that Bobby, this was kind of Bobby's band, and so Bobby had a huge hand in all of this. So I think he might have, Jason, don't quote me, but I believe Jason wrote the lyrics, but Bobby probably, kind of went through them and helped, worked them up a little bit.
Got a seal of approval.
Well, I mean, that's
right?
normal. That's normal collaboration, though. There's a lot of stuff I've tried getting past Joe over the years, and him being like, no, we got to redo that. And,
it's okay to rhyme, Dan.
It's okay to sing sometimes. Yeah, no, this record was, but I mean, despite whether it was real or not real, or or whatever, if it was all tough guy stuff or whatever, it definitely sounded good for the time. And I've got nothing but fuzzy memories of this record. I think listening to it now in 2018, there were parts of it that kind of came across as lame, but there were songs like "Hate," which was the first song I ever heard by Primer, and I still love that song. I was jamming that on the way down, and I just like the emotional build-up. It's got a weird, funky, intro to it, and it just builds. It's a very intense, emotional song, but you hear the first 3-4 seconds of it, and you don't realize that that's where it's going.
Right.
And I always thought that was really cool. I definitely liked the more like funky aspects of the band, because I was really into stuff like Incubus, like the early Incubus stuff, which was more of like a funk metal hybrid, and there's a little bit of that here too. And it's definitely, they definitely borrowed the best parts, I think, of like Limp Bizkit, Incubus, 311, some Korn in there with the riffage, and it definitely all sounded good. And like I said, I'm surprised after talking to you, Josh, and talking to people about Primer, and realizing that they weren't as big of a band as as what my perception was, because you hear them on the radio, you assume that they're just as big as Limp Bizkit, or they're just as big as Korn or Slipknot or whoever, and you realize that, oh no, wow. If there was an opportunity for a band to get the short end of the stick, it was always them,
Yeah, and I think that had a little bit to do with the revolving door lineup. I mean, even this first album, Introduction to Mayhem, it's basically Bobby playing guitar and bass, Jason singing, and then drum machines and stuff like that. So it was never truly like a, this wasn't four dudes that grew up together and started playing in their mom's garage together and all that stuff. It was, this was kind of the brainchild of Bobby and Jason, and then they kind of had a revolving door of bass and drums there for a long time.
What were your favorite songs to play?
I was actually looking at it earlier. The, like I said, Super Freak Love was probably always one of my favorites, and then Loose was always good. Introduction to Mayhem, The Big Fuck You, Set It Off. I always loved playing Set It Off. Some of the last tours we did when I was in the band in like 07, 08, we were pulling out like Stain and stuff like that. So yeah, like this album is a lot of fun to play just all around. But yeah, some of those mainstays, The Big Fuck You, Introduction to Mayhem, Set It Off, and Super Freak Love. You can't really go wrong playing these songs. And the one thing about the kind of revolving door lineup of the band is this is kind of where I came into the band, because they lost their drummer and bass player on this run, and it came up on the PRP back in the day when I was even just an avid reader of the PRP, and I had a relationship with the guy that runs that website back in the day, and I emailed him. I'm like, hey, can I get an email or a phone number or something? And he gave me Bobby's email address, and I ended up going up and auditioning between Introduction to Mayhem and the new release. And I actually was helping them audition drummers. I would go up and if they were auditioning drummers, I would go up and play bass with them then. And they ended up going with Kobe, who is pictured on the second album.
Yeah, he's on the record, yeah.
But again, it's still Bobby playing on the album. But yeah, so I would go up there and do that stuff. And I think in my young and dumb 21-year-old brain, I think they had kind of told me it came down to me and Kobe. And I think I called him one day and kind of put my foot down, and I think I overstepped my bounds because I was like, well, if you can't give me an answer, I'm gonna just go ahead and withdraw my name or something, something out of a movie. And I guess it didn't work because
you should have thrown some shit out there. Well, I guess I'll go ahead and call Fred back then. Fuck you guys.
Right? Yeah, that would have been nice.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go become a podcasting legend.
Yeah, you fuckers just wait. Yeah.
Just wait. In about 15 years, I'm gonna make all this. I'm
gonna be interviewing. Yeah. Oh my goodness. So the new release comes out. Did any of you guys hear This Life on the radio when it was released as a single?
No, it definitely got played. I think just because of the proximity, St. Louis, we got plenty of the bleed over.
Well, they're still playing This Life on the radio.
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm getting at. Is they're
Dan's about to make a clever quip about nu metal in the city of St. Louis.
Well, I mean, I'm done.
Yeah. Well, even if he does or doesn't, I mean, it is the truth. I mean, we like our nu metal. I mean, they play what people like, and St. Louis likes nu metal, and they always have, and it never went away here, and it probably never will. And I think part of that is, this is kind of a beer and music town, and sports. Unfortunately, Blues aren't in the playoffs, but
well, I think it was a lot better.
Predators won't be for much longer either.
Yeah, I was gonna say, go Jets.
I'm glad
we'll find out tomorrow.
I'm glad that they didn't get in and just choke like they always do anyway.
Yeah, I know.
So,
they're like the lovable losers of hockey.
Yeah.
Except nobody loves them unless they're from St. Louis.
Pretty much. Well, it's the same way with the Cardinals and baseball.
Yeah, no. Cardinals all over the place.
Cardinals fans are like literally the least sportsman-like baseball fans that you could ever meet.
Have you ever met a Yankees fan? Anyway. Yeah. I think Joe just might have forgotten, because I know that it still gets like.
There's no way he didn't hear it. Yeah,
right. If you were listening to the point, you heard it.
There's a lot of lesser-known bands that have been played over the years that 10 years has gone by, and I hear that song, and I'm like, I remember that. What band is this? Oh, I look it up. Hey, this album's really good. This is one of those bands. I definitely heard it, but it didn't reappear until much later.
Well, let's get this out of the way now. It doesn't sound like a Primer song in comparison to everything that was on the previous album. I mean, I recognized the singer. It's one of those, like, you hear a song and you're like, I know this band, but I could never place it. And then, by the end of the song, they're like, that was Primer 55 with This Life. And I was like, holy shit, they've gone mainstream. And, like, that didn't bother me, I guess, back then. But, like,
at that time, this is just a good fucking song.
Well, what really stood out to me was the cleans. Like, the clean singing was something that we really didn't associate with Primer at the time. And so it was really weird hearing a little bit more. It's like a song about domestic abuse and, murder, because you got to have murder. And it was just a really intense, emotional song, which we got a little bit of that on Introduction to Mayhem, in the sense that it was like mostly just like tough guy shit, but there was some like actual introspective moments on that record, and this song kind of brought all that to the forefront. And so I like the cleans, I like the screams, and the song just flows really well, even if it does have kind of a verse, chorus, verse. I mean, that's what the radio stations wanted, And I think it worked really well as a single. Like I said, they're still playing it here. And so it's kind of funny whenever I buy the record, you go into the next song and it's just back to being Primer again, which I thought was kind of funny.
Well, the first time I heard This Life was on a compilation called Dude, Where's My Skull? And it was the some sort of compilation that Island or something put out. And this is like, I was at home in my house with the rest of the bandmates that I was playing with at the time, and I put it in and I hit play and I heard This Life for the first time, and I truly just, like, my heart dropped because of how I thought this song was amazing, and I was so bummed that I didn't get it. I was like, the culmination of, like, all right, they're in the studio now, they're making a new album. And this was the first chance I got to hear the album that I wasn't a part of. And when I first heard This Life, I was just like, man, this is so good. And I was just so bummed that I didn't get in Primer 55 at the time.
And how many months later was it that you were on stage playing that song with the band?
It looks like a year, actually, because it looks like the album came out in August of 2001, and I joined around late 2002. So
Okay.
But then I went and saw them a couple of times on this tour. They came through Nashville with like Fear Factory, I believe, and once again went and hung out with them, talked to them again, and then I just kept in touch with those guys, and when my opportunity came up, I was there.
Persistence pays off.
I guess. I think a lot of this, and it even carries over to the podcast, having guests on of people that I met back in the day. But I think it was just also just not being an asshole the entire time, like just being someone you could get along with and, talk to. And, so when I started a podcast, some of those dudes I toured with and whatnot, I just kind of reached out and said, hey, would you like to do my show? And they're like, oh, yeah, Toomey was all right. I'll do his podcast. When I interviewed Bobby about this, because it's funny being in the band, but you don't really have these deep conversations, about certain things. And so when I had him on my podcast, I got to actually talk to him about ideas and why did you do this? Why did you do that? And I believe I asked him at the time, I was like, what was the big departure between the first and second album? And he basically said at the time that the oversaturation of nu metal, they wanted to kind of go in more of a rock vein for this album, and they were already seeing at the time, the nu metal thing was already too much and gonna die out soon. So I think they tried to do an actual, just full on rock and roll album.
Well, I think they did a good job. I like it more than the first.
This is much more interesting.
Yeah.
Than Introduction to Mayhem, because in a certain sense you can say that record, when you hear Loose, you've heard everything that you're going to hear after that.
Right.
There's not a lot of surprises on Introduction to Mayhem, but on the new release, you start off with a track like This Life, which totally sets you up for an experience that you're not going to necessarily have. And, you go into the second track and it sounds more like it's off of Introduction to Mayhem. And then you get to that song about Texas, and you're like,
what?
Probably my least favorite song on the record, because I went to Texas and it was nothing like this. And so false advertising.
5 or 55 guys are liars.
They're fucking liars.
They're full
man.
of shit.
Yeah.
John Denver's full of shit, man.
Yeah, it was more like I just had to go to business meetings and shit for the whole week. But, it was,
And then you got to No Sleep and you got your ass handed to you. Man, that's a brutal track. I love that.
Yeah, No Sleep was good.
Yeah.
Again, lyrics on this record so much more introspective, though. Like I said, except for Texas. They're so introspective and so much more relatable.
I feel like you want me to change the song.
Yes, I do want you to change the song.
All right, Tricycle.
I just, there's just a huge variety of different influences on this record, but not like Introduction to Mayhem, where it was just other nu metal bands were the inspiration. I mean, there's a lot of mainstream rock, metal. There's even some punk in there with some gang vocals and kind of more punk tempos later on. And this record just kind of goes all over the place, and it's definitely really musically diverse. But I can't help but feel like maybe that was also kind of suicide for the band. The hardest decision you can make when you're making a record is, do I stick to my guns and just keep unabashedly doing the same thing that I was doing before and hoping it works this time? Or, do I branch out and be diverse? But the problem with that is you run into the issue of you have people, a certain demographic that likes one song, and then you've got another demographic that hates you now because you don't sound like you did on your first record. And then you've got another demographic that's like, oh, I really like this super deep cut over here that sounds nothing like anything you did before. And so I think that was really that was the dichotomy with this record, because there were times where I loved it and there were times that I hated it, all within its runtime, and that's kind of hard to reconcile.
It's too much variety. It doesn't no one latches onto it, because by the time you find something you like, they're on to the next thing and you're wondering where the hell that band went.
Well, considering I'm bipolar...
Where did these horns come from?
Yeah.
Right.
No, I'm all over the freaking place, and so's the album, so it works fine for me. But I know I'm in the minority.
So one guy did.
Yeah, that's me. I mean,
I think I think one of the big things that kind of happened with this album too, and you know, we talk a lot about Roach Coach, but you know, this album came out August of 2001. A couple months later, September 11th.
Yeah.
That was another thing that, you know, Bobby kind of hit on was, you know, they were on, I forget where they were on tour, but they were just basically stuck for like 4 days, just sitting in a bus in, you know, like Seattle or something, because the entire business, you know, the entire music business just stopped. And, you know, all of Island Def Jam based out of New York, and they were trying to figure all that stuff out. And then I think that just kind of, you know, shelved this album, and that, you know, for the most part, they kind of shelved the album. And, you know, that's why not a lot of people know about this album, just because it kind of came out in that September 11th era, because it came out, you know, number 1 on the Billboard, you know, Heatseekers chart, number 102 on the Billboard 200. It had a decent single. You know, I think if they, you know, there was never a video for This Life. I don't believe there was never like that proper push for it that I think it could have gotten. But, you know, and this is the time period where I joined the band and on this tour cycle, and the shows are great. I mean, we had some of the biggest shows I've ever played on this tour, and you know, it just kind of all fell apart after that, and the band was already, you know, internally fighting and everything else. So it was good times and bad times, I have to say.
Well, I would say on the record itself, I mean, there was a lot of growth. I felt, you know, not just the variety. I don't necessarily think you have to grow musically to have a variety, but I thought Jason's vocals were much more diverse on this record. I had no idea the dude could actually sing, and sing pretty well, for that matter. That kind of blew me away. Even the rapping, you know, he does a little bit more like the downbeat stuff, like a little bit more relaxed, you know, down tempo stuff that, you know, whereas on Introduction to Mayhem, you had that a couple of times, but it was mostly just pure energy, like just spit it out as quick as you can, and, you know, and move on. So this record definitely, really, he had much more diverse palette, I guess, for different ways of approaching the songs, and so I always respected that.
I think that's part of the reason why I like the album is the range, you know, musically and vocally.
Yeah, and there's some of the vocals too in there. Bobby singing too, like Pills. That's Bobby singing.
Yeah.
Some of the stuff here and there is Bobby singing too. So added another voice to it, and then they also, obviously, the hugest part of this album is the drums. It's John Stanier Helmet. So that's always a big deal there too when you get the drummer of Helmet on your album.
Well, no, the drumming was definitely above average, especially if you considering the first record. That was one of the first things I noticed. I guess Joe's finally getting to me after all this time, but I did notice that, and
I've reached him.
You know, I think
there you go.
I think this record really. Do you think if September 11th hadn't happened, God, that's a huge fucking question. But if it hadn't happened, like, you think this may have been a good breakthrough for the band?
I mean, like I said, I think it could have, and I think of all things, like, if September 11th hadn't happened, would Primer 55 be a big band? Is probably the last question we need to be asking. But yeah, I think it. You know, I think that if they would have gone, you know, This Life, and then maybe thrown out a fun Texas video or something, because every time we played Texas every show we played, and you know, it's one of those songs where everybody starts goofy dancing and getting into it. So it was, you know, definitely could have had an impact there. And you know, some of the other stuff on there too, I think, you know, first couple of songs of this album probably could have been singles. So Proper Push and No September 11th, and but I think the band was also kind of struggling internally too. So, you know, there was all kinds of stuff going on behind the scenes in the band too that kind of kept it from getting further along, I guess.
Yeah, so let's get into that. No, I'm kidding.
No, that's not what we're here for, man.
That's podcasting 101. Don't delve too deep. But yeah, so this record was just very interesting to me, and I actually really enjoyed it more when we did the re-listen this week than I did when it first came out, because that was a very volatile time for me, and I wasn't that interested in nu metal at the time, so I didn't really appreciate it for what it was at the time. But now that I'm so...
Yeah, but I think that's kind of what they were going for. If you weren't into nu metal at the time, you know, I think they were trying to. They were also not into nu metal at the time, and they were trying to move on from that too.
Well, and I didn't hate it as much as, you know, maybe some of the other bands that were out around that time that were basically still doing the same thing they were doing in 2001, you know, or doing in like 2000 and
Right.
Well, 2000.
2000.
I'm running
2000 and 0.
I'm running out of 2000s, but yeah, like 98 through 2001.
Yeah.
Bands that really didn't change. Kind of bothered me, and I think at that time I just was kind of like, I'm gonna just start looking for stuff that's heavier, because that's the stuff that I liked, was the really heavy shit, your Korns and Slipknot and Mudvayne and Il Niño and like those heavier bands. Those what I called on the last podcast the next level nu metal bands.
Right.
Those were the ones that I kind of stuck with, and then obviously it wasn't a huge jump over to stuff like Meshuggah and heavier
Then you
stuff.
started entering my territory.
Right, and so. But this record definitely is unique. It's kind of oddball, and it's kind of weird that this is kind of more or less where they stopped. I mean, at least as far as new output. I mean, Primer was still around all the way through 2008 almost.
Technically, but after the tours I did in 2002, the band broke up in 2000, like December of 2002, and Bobby and I ended up doing another band after that with Jason Danton Flaw. And then while we were kind of getting that together is when Bobby got the email or phone call about joining Soulfly, and then that kind of just threw all that out the window, and Bobby went on to Soulfly. And then roughly 2007, I got some word that they were putting out that B-sides album that what is it, Family for Life or whatever.
Yeah.
And so I Family for Life. And I reached out to Bobby then. I was like, are we, / you guys touring this or whatever? And he's like, well, I guess you were the last bass player of the band, so let's go tour.
Sure. Hey, sweet, got a bass player. Don't have to train him. Yeah.
Right. And that's when we went and toured that. I toured that in 2007, 2008, and then that's when I left the band to just kind of focus on the family stuff. But yeah, that's I did the stuff on the new release album, and then I did the stuff on the Family for Life, B-sides album.
Well, and on that tour, and I think this is Primer. Did Jason not end up leaving the band mid-tour on that?
Yeah, we were in Chicago, and he had moved to Wisconsin, and he was kind of we were in a van in a trailer, and him and his wife or whoever she was at the time were kind of coming in and out, like they would go to the show and then they would go back home to Wisconsin and then go to the next show and then go back home to Wisconsin. It was this very odd thing. And then by the time we started to get to part of the country where he couldn't do that anymore, I honestly, I can't remember if he didn't show up or was told not to come back or whatnot. And we took a couple of days off and got a replacement singer, which was a complete disaster. And then that's when the DRP, Donnie Polinsky, joined the band right after that. And I ended up actually getting Donnie in the band. And then I think we played one show together, and then I left the band. So it's kind of funny looking. I was looking through some emails. I was looking through some emails the other day, and I found where Donnie originally sent me emails saying who he was and sent me his, because I guess we were sending out songs and having people record their vocals and send it back. And I had Donnie's original Primer 55 tryout demos, and I thought he was really good, man. I like Donnie a lot. He's doing a lot of stuff right now with his Force 5 records and doing solo stuff. But yeah, Donnie's a good dude.
Yeah, it's got to be kind of hard just going our singer's gone. Here's this other guy, Yeah. Especially that style of music, there was always definitely a huge push, as to, really in all styles of music, right? Everybody tends to gravitate towards the singer for some reason. Even though logistically the singer almost has the least to do with the actual music.
Yeah, but I think most of the times, that's the one thing you kind of gravitate towards the first, when I listen to Skid Row, I want to hear Sebastian Bach. I don't want to hear anybody else, and
True.
Things like that. And so, I'm a big stickler for singers too. And so even when Jason left the band, and their press releases and stuff out there where Bobby's like, Toomey and I will continue on and carrying on the torch and all this other stuff. I was bummed back then, when Jason wasn't in the band, and through Facebook over the last few years, reconnected with Jason and have somewhat of an amicable relationship and stuff. So that's good, and I'm glad he seems to be in a better place. And he actually sent me some demo stuff. I guess he was working on kind of a heavier project not too long ago, and it seemed to be pretty good.
Awesome. Well, hopefully that'll be something that shows up at some point.
Yeah.
I know some people just work on music therapeutically. It doesn't necessarily mean that, they're going to release it. But yeah, no, I definitely liked him. Hearing him in a heavier project would be interesting, I think.
Right.
But yeah, so I mean that was pretty much it. I mean, we had a B-sides release after the new release. But short and sweet, right?
Yeah, right.
We made it to an hour.
Wait until next week.
Right. We're doing 2 bands that only have 1 album each.
But I will say, and you guys kind of hit on it earlier, and I was kind of going to bring it at the end, but the one thing that for years and years in there, I would tell people that I was in Primer 55, and it would kind of like either no one would care or an eye roll or whatnot. But then within the last like couple of years, it's like people are like, "Oh, you're in Primer 55! Oh my God!" Like it's a whole different reaction when people find out that I've been in the band. And then you'll see these like list of the greatest nu metal bands, and Primer's always in that like lower tier stuff, but they're always mentioned in the with the head PEs and the kitties and all that stuff. It seems like the name is still out there, and I would love to for Bobby and Jason to kind of get back together and put a band together and go out and do some stuff, because I think the nu metal era is kind of coming back around, and a resurgence in people caring about this stuff. And I think that this is the time when the nostalgia factor of all that stuff kind of comes back around. And I think that on a Make America Rock Again tour, like one of those tours with Alien Ant Farm and whatever band, I think they would do really well.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think that clearly now is the time. It was. I mean, the resurgence of nu metal has been kind of incredible in the sense that like it was that thing that everybody decided that they hated collectively, and then it was like, well, you know what? I kind of miss songs that I can sing along to, and I kind of miss that aggression, that heaviness. Like I feel like when I got really into death metal and metalcore and stuff, I was very much like, nu metal's not even heavy; it's just commercial. It's just slightly beefed up radio rock. Like
right.
And in some cases that's true, but I think for the majority of it, I think I've come to appreciate nu metal as just a different kind of heavy, and just kind of its own. It's kind of unique in that there weren't a lot of offshoots of nu metal. I don't really feel like it ever necessarily morphed into a different style, like a lot of types of music tend to do, and so I mean it just stands unique, and I think people miss that. I feel like if a band like Primer got together and went on tour right now, they'd be very surprised at the turnouts.
Well, I think it's because it's cyclical. I mean, if you think about it, the people who were listening to nu metal are now, in their 30s and 40s, and they're the ones with the buying power. They're the ones that have kids now, and they're introducing it to a new generation, which is their own kids. So you just kind of like how it was 5-10 years ago, new wave had a big kind of resurgence, and there was it was a bunch of bands that were kind of trying to emulate that new wave 80s sound. I won't be surprised if all of a sudden we're going to get some new bands that actually have more nu metal elements in it, just because, like I said, it's cyclical. People are going to see what's selling, and they're saying, oh well, Primer 55 is selling again, Korn's still selling, Limp Bizkit's back and selling, stuff like that. People want to pick up on that and make a couple of bucks on the process.
Absolutely. The I lost my train of thought. But the resurgence of bands like the new bands coming out with like Dead and the band Cane Hill. The dudes in Cane Hill are wearing Primer 55 t-shirts in their promo photos. So I think that's just That's always crazy. And actually, when they came through town opening for Devil Driver, I went down and talked to them. And I had a stack of like Primer 55 stickers from 15 years ago, and I took a few of them down, and they were all like, "Oh my God, this is so awesome!" And
Nice.
it's a completely different world from where when I left the band to now. And like I've said it many times, and I would love to see them try to resurrect, Primer as Jason and Bobby, because, Bobby had a version of Primer up until a couple of years ago. I actually got up and played loose with them in like 2016 at a show in right outside Louisville. So, there's been versions of Primer running around.
So a different
and Bobby
singer and it's basically just Bobby and friends.
Yeah, Bobby and friends. And Bobby was actually, I think, singing for a long time. They were like a 3-piece and stuff. So, all in all, though, I hope that Bobby and Jason can mend the fences and get the band back together, kind of thing. I think it would be fun to go see or partake in.
Yeah, get another album out so that we can meet our 3-album rule that we break all the time.
Right. Well, I guess you could have talked about the As Seen on TV, demo from prior to Introduction to Mayhem, which is basically just Introduction to Mayhem recorded differently.
I was going to say, yeah, good luck finding that, though. If you're, I'm sure it's on YouTube.
Well, they actually released it as I believe it's called The Big Fuck You.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I did. I listened to, okay, so that's what that is. Okay.
Yeah, it's like the As Seen on TV demo and some other stuff, but yeah.
Interesting. Josh, in a couple of months, we're all going to be hanging out again at the Nashville
it's going to be
Rock
fun.
and
You guys
Pod
are part
Expo.
of it this year, and you're not just hanging out.
Yeah, we actually decided to go full tilt. I mean, I think this time last year it was one of those, like, we could have set up a booth, but it was just one of those, like, it was so
It was last minute.
Minute, yeah.
We didn't realize it till it was too late, kind of thing.
Yeah. So,
right.
But this year we were all in, and it's really exciting. It's going to be should be a good time. We're actually going to bring our own cooler of beer, so we'll actually have some of the good stuff this time. It won't be just a Miller Lite fest or a Pabst Blue Ribbon fest.
Well, I mean, some
PBR.
of it will, because you're going to have to stay functional for at least 6 of the 8 hours.
Well, you don't think
Well, I'm definitely not going to partake as early as I did last time. I still have, I think, 3 interviews I did after a certain point to where there's like no way I'll ever release those. Like they're just completely just slurring and sloshing and just shirring my words and stuff. It's terrible.
Well, come on, I do that every week.
It has been. I don't know how much has been announced yet, so I'll give you some breaking news here on this one. But I will be moderating the Head panel. So Brian Head Welch of Korn will be up doing a panel, and I will be moderating that. So that'll be a lot of fun.
Very cool.
Fuck.
Yeah, that's very cool.
I want to release this tonight now.
Brian Head Welch, Vinnie Vincent, Toby Wright, which we're actually really excited about. We talked to Toby for a couple of minutes last year, but it was nothing official, so we'll definitely have to have him. Hey, man, sit down at our booth. It'll be cool. Why is this guy blocking me in? I want to get out. No. We need to talk about a few things.
No, Toby seemed to be cool, man. And actually, when I interviewed him, I didn't have his like discography up, and he pulled up his own discography on Wikipedia and handed it to me, so we had more to talk about.
Very cool.
He was definitely a lot of fun. He was cool. And then just all of the mainstays of all the podcasters that are going to be there. You guys are going to be there. Hopefully, at least Lauren from Roach Coach will come down with me. A good company with Bowling. Scott Bowling, our good friend, is going to be up there.
Cobras and Fire will be there.
Cobras and Fire, Decibel Geek, Rock and Metal Combat Podcast. The one podcast is basically funding this whole thing.
Right.
Rock and Metal Combat Podcast.
Which we'll play a promo here in a couple of minutes that we recorded a few weeks ago that it gives all the details, because for some reason when we recorded that I could not get it down at all. We tried recording it real time. I ended up having to type out everything that I was going to say and then read it off of the computer screen.
It happens.
Yeah, it's not very good at doing scripted stuff. But
no radio spots for Dan.
No radio spots for me. No, I was on the radio, but didn't ever have to. I think all I ever had to do is be like, "You're listening to such and such station," and then every 3 hours. Beyond that, I didn't actually even have to really speak that much.
Did we ever talk about my Christian music show I had?
Yeah. I think we talked about that on our original episode last year.
Okay.
Was the Christian?
I can still picture the guy that came in after me that played the Christian metal. Like, this is Tourniquet, and he would be up like waving his arms and freaking out, and that's some of the first time I ever heard some of that stuff. But.
Yeah. Well, I'm really sad that you didn't dig Reborn by Living Sacrifice, but considering the circumstances, I understand 100%.
Yeah, I'll have to go back and revisit that. It was definitely I was much more of a music snob back then too. So
yeah, it definitely blew me away back in the day. It was
the hammering process.
Well, the hammering process is good too, but I mean,
Reborn was the one for me.
Reborn, it's one of those like you can't like Sepultura and Soulfly and stuff and not at least appreciate what Living Sacrifice was throwing down at that time. But yeah,
there is a lot of similarities there.
We're like really trying to cut back on the amount of Christian metal we cover on the show because it's starting to weird people out. But well, it's kind of funny.
That's Dane's bread and butter.
We've had oh my god, it is. Well, when John Beatty was like, "Hey man," he's like, "I want to talk about Hopesfall. You know a lot about them, right?" I was like, "Dude, Hopesfall is a Dan Terry special. They were a Christian hardcore band that has had 100 lineup changes. That is no longer a Christian hardcore band. Like it is 100% like they check all the boxes for me. So that's going to be really interesting."
So we're going to do our albums of the week?
Yeah, we do our albums of the week. He's been like gnawing at the bit for this.
Man, I can't wait for this one because I'm not going to do a metal one. I can't help myself.
So Josh, what's your album of the week?
What have I been listening to? Let's go ahead and go with the brand new Seven Dust album, All I See Is War. I don't know if it's out yet or not, but maybe by the time this is out, it should be out. But man, they're killing it once again. Love those guys.
Jeff, what about you?
Introducing by DJ Shadow.
Introduction to Mayhem by Primer 55. I'll take it.
I've been in preparation. I've been listening to The Satellite Years by Hopesfall.
Never heard of them.
Are you kidding me?
You fuck.
No, I have. I'm just kidding.
Josh only comes on the show to give me shit. That's literally the.
I thought that was a prerequisite for all, I guess.
That's the prize at the end of the tunnel.
Hey, you'll be the first one in line for my new Talk Toomey tee. Just to let you know, the tagline is a vulgar display of podcast.
Nice. It's funny as I'll probably get one.
Sleeping Giant, Kingdom Days in an Evil Age.
Nice. I just got the first Sleeping Giant album on vinyl. Dread Champions of the Last Days.
Very nice.
Yeah. But one of these days, and I don't know if it's going to be this year, but we've been tossing it back and forth. We will probably be sitting down and having a for real adult discussion about the Pantera albums because people have wanted that. I've gotten emails saying your Pantera episode was funny and all that, but like we want to know what you guys really think of it. Give it the full treatment. Do the actual album by album recap and all that. So that's definitely something that we're gonna. That's definitely something we're going to be doing. I just kind of keep pushing it off, but we'll definitely try to get you for that one.
Yeah, that would be a lot of fun. Yeah, Beyond for Greatness.
There you go. See, I've sold out now.
Yeah, as I say, Dan will actually be nice on that one instead of doing his fake wrestling bad guy thing.
I didn't do a very good job.
Did you just say wrestling was fake?
What?
I said fake bad guy thing.
And on that note, Jeff is going to die.
He's a heel. Would you like me to say that?
I love
instead?
how at the beginning of our show and at the end of our show, everything just completely falls apart. Like, it's such a cold open. Whenever we have guests on that have never been on our show before, they're always like, are these guys ever going to talk about the band? Or
are we done yet?
Yeah,
is this over?
We're definitely done, yeah.
And on that note, this has been episode 65 of Discography Discussion. Thank you for listening. You can like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter at Discuss Metal. Subscribe to our podcast everywhere you listen to podcasts, including Google Play, iTunes, and Stitcher. Visit discussmetal.com for all things discography discussion, and please send questions and comments to danandjoeshow@gmail.com. If you are not a patron, you can become one at patreon.com/discussmetal. We have some sweet perks.
metalnexus.net/talk-to-me.
In 2017, Decibel Geek brought us Rockin' Pod Expo in Nashville, Tennessee. This summer, they're doing it again. Rockin' Pod Expo 2 on August 25th. Tell us about it, Dan.
We couldn't be more thrilled to be appearing at Rockin' Pod this year. In an effort to help support this amazing event, we are throwing in some perks for you guys to help raise the funds necessary to make this event happen. A $35 donation on behalf of Discography Discussion to the Rockin' Pod Expo gets you a limited edition Discography Discussion hand-painted beer glass and the option to choose what band we talk about in an upcoming episode of the podcast. This also includes your admission to the expo, access to an exclusive podcast made only for contributors to the event, and we can't wait to meet some of you guys there in person. We'll be hanging out chatting all day. Keep in mind on these perks, there are only 3 of them available, so act fast, and we hope to see you there.